what they know about the world is going to help them comprehend what they read. Social studies is learning about the world. It's the exact knowledge, vocabulary that complex texts are going to assume that they know. So this is the place for them to learn that content.
Welcome to Season 2 of the History Matters podcast. I'm Dr. Kristen McQuillan, Executive Director of Knowledge Matters. This season, our hosts, Kyair, Barbara Davidson, and Ebony McKeever, along with their guests, will tell the story of how elementary history instruction serves both literacy and civic goals.
Hi, I'm Kyair, one of the hosts for the History Matters podcast. I'm a Baltimore City school teacher, a former Teacher of the Year, and a contributor to Knowledge Matters. I talked with Melissa Loftus. She co-hosts the popular podcast Melissa and Lori Love Literacy and is co-author of the Literacy 50, a Q&A handbook for teachers. She's a former ELA teacher and reading specialist, and now works to bring research-based reading and writing practices to educators. During our conversation, Melissa and I discussed the critical role of content knowledge in student comprehension and how kids need to know stuff to become better readers and stay curious about the world. I think you'll enjoy this discussion. So we're here today to talk a little bit about history instruction in the elementary grades. But I do want to spend some time connecting the dots for our listeners. When we talk about history, geography, civics in the elementary grades, we're also talking about content knowledge. And I always like to kind of qualify that for listeners out there, right? Not to teacher-splain, but content is really just the stuff that our kids are going to learn. So can you, Melissa, just talk a little bit about what exactly does the research say about the connection between content knowledge and this very technical term, stuff, and reading comprehension?
Stuff is a great term. I love that. You have to know stuff. But no, I mean, yeah, Kyair, the research is pretty clear that knowledge matters for comprehension. I don't think that is really a contested finding in any way. I mean, you and I both know, like, decoding accurately matters, right? There's a lot that goes into that, and we'll probably touch on it along the way here. But, so does knowing about the topic. Just like what students know about the world is going to shape how well they comprehend a text about some stuff about the world, right? Like, you have to know about it.
1,000%. But I think that when it comes to thinking about a school building and decision-making, I would love us to just have this conversation because you hit on it about decoding and those foundational skills. So when schools are making decisions, and sometimes, unfortunately, it's about what content to decrease or even cut, how can educators just sort of balance foundational reading skills with also building meaningful content knowledge? I know sometimes it also gets into scheduling, but Melissa, where is the balance in a world with finite time?
Yeah. Well, you're getting to that. Let me just hit home the balance, though. I think that's one thing to just hit home because, the science of reading has been a thing lately. It's been something on everyone's mind and everyone's trying to make sure everything lines up with the science of reading. But that often gets mistranslated into teaching phonics and sometimes going overboard, as we often do in education. It's like, well, if this one thing is really important, then that's what we need to do. So I just want to caution anyone out there who might still be on that train of thought of well, if the science of reading is really important and I'm misinterpreting that to mean just phonics, let me clear that up, that it's a misinterpretation of just phonics, then, some schedules are looking much more like, okay, well, then let's do 60, 90 minutes of phonics instruction. Let's make that the block. And that is not what anyone is arguing for. I think everyone would say we have to keep that instruction tight so that it's maybe 30 minutes, so that you have room for this content instruction, even in the youngest grades. And I think that is another misconception. There's even that saying, right? We learn to read in the younger grades and then they read to learn. And it's whoa. We have to make sure, even in the youngest grades, honestly, even before they get to school, that they are reading to learn. And I know some people are probably sitting there thinking, but they don't know how to read yet. And that is where something really important comes in, which is read alouds. So even in those youngest grades, if students are not able to read on their own yet. One of the best things teachers can do is read aloud. And those children's books are chock full of great vocabulary, great content about the world, if you find good ones, right? So, it is huge for kids to have that experience and not wait. And again, I get where that saying comes from, learning to read and then reading to learn. But at the same time, again, it gets misinterpreted. We tend to go overboard in education, and then people say, okay, well, they don't need to read anything to learn until after third grade or after second grade. And it's like, whoa. They need all of that vocabulary and that content to be able to read those harder texts once they get to third and fourth grade. So they're not competing priorities, right? The goal isn't, do we teach phonics or knowledge, right? But strong literacy instruction includes both.
Melissa, how has our thinking sort of shifted over the years when it comes to content knowledge and how we teach kids to read?
One thing that I think we forget is just how much harder the texts get over the years. I mean, that is the biggest thing that changes. And that text, again, can be really difficult for different reasons, right? This one could be difficult for one student and not another because one kid knows a lot about that content. So it's not as difficult for them. Or it could just be a really tough text because it's about something they've all never heard of, or because the sentence structure is really tough, or, there's various reasons why any one text could be difficult for each student. And that is what we didn't pay enough attention to, was what is in this text that's going to make it hard for my students? And that includes, you said content knowledge, that includes the knowledge that they are assumed to bring, right, to that text. Because authors don't write, especially as texts get harder over the years, there's a lot of what the author writes is just I'm assuming that the reader knows something about this, and they are bringing something to this text to make sense of it. So we as teachers have to go, wait a second, if the author is assuming that they know something about this, and I know my students don't, what do I need to do to help them make sense of this? How do we look at the text and think, okay, they're still going to find the main idea here, but the reason they're finding the main idea is because it's going to actually help them make sense of this text and learn something from it and take something away that's going to add to their knowledge, right? Their little spider web of knowledge in their brain, they're going to add to it so that when they come to another text, they have that knowledge that they learned from this text.
So I want to talk a little bit about in what ways can social studies content and that knowledge actually make kids better readers and writers.
So we go back to one of the very first things I said, right? It was what they know about the world is going to help them comprehend what they read. Social studies is learning about the world. It's the exact knowledge, vocabulary that complex texts are going to assume that they know. So this is the place for them to learn that content. And it gives them a reason to want to read more closely and think more deeply about what they're reading. And I'll add, there is research behind it. I know Fordham Institute has some research about specifically that richer social studies instruction was actually linked to stronger reading comprehension growth. So, it builds that vocabulary, it builds that general knowledge, right? And you're just making me think too about this idea of sometimes I think of my social studies classes from when I was young. I'll just put it on myself. And I felt like it was a lot of memorizing things, when did this happen? But, when you really think about it, it's much more about your kids probably have such a deeper understanding of, so what if they can't tell you the year that it happened, right? But they get it, right? They get what it was like, what happened, what was going on at that time, because they're reading this text and they're making sense of it. And it's something that's sticking. It's sticking for them, right?
Absolutely. So if people might be wondering to themselves, okay, so we're learning the history. We're learning geography, civics, culture. How does that learning actually set our kids up to tackle harder texts down the road?
Yeah, we've mentioned a few things already. I mean, vocabulary is one. Every social studies text, every social studies unit is just going to have so many words. I mean, even just thinking about, and they're not just tough words you'll never see again, but, words like democracy and migration and conflict and, these words that are going to come up again and again and again, even in different, totally different, unrelated things, but still coming back to that idea of conflict or an idea of migration in a totally different way, right? Like these ideas that are built in social studies, they are so, like, I keep saying it, but it's like, it is so foundational to what kids know about the world that it is just building their knowledge for making sense of those texts. And we mentioned before too, like authors aren't going to explain that as the texts get harder. They're not going to explain to you that, like, yeah, social studies texts, when you're first learning what migration means, sure, they're going to explain it. Later down the road, they're going to expect you to know what it is already, So like, again, they're going to expect you to bring that knowledge to the texts. And I like to think about it as like, kind of like you're walking around a neighborhood and, if like you're in a brand new neighborhood, like, I go to like New York City, I've never been there. I am like completely overwhelmed. And my brain just goes to like, get to where you need to go, right? Like get to the place you need to go. And that's kind of where kids are when they don't know anything about what they're reading, right? It's just like, okay, what my teacher wants me to write this answer to this question. Let me find that and get that answer written down. But, if you're in your own neighborhood, you already know where you're going. You don't even have to think about it, just walking around the block. That's when you can like pause and notice, oh, like, I wonder what my neighbor's doing today. I wonder what's going on over there. Oh, this tree got cut down. Like you start noticing all the things. That's what can happen when like a kid knows something already about that topic they're coming to. So if they're bringing all that from social studies about the world to this text, they can stop and really think about what's going on in that text versus just like, let me get to the end, do whatever my teacher asked me to do and get out of here.
Well, that to me also comes down to how important the speaking and listening skills are, because knowledge is a party. And when students don't have the knowledge, it's as if it's prom or whatever your special thing was, and you didn't get the invitation and nobody asked you, and it hurts as a student, right? So now there's a whole other conversation about SEL and safety in the classroom, and do I even want to participate and take academic risks? But I feel like when we integrate the content and the skills and students continue to build this knowledge, well, Melissa, I want to take the academic risk. I feel safe because I got an invitation to the knowledge party and I want to show up and I also want to show out. And I think that there's a role for that, right, in all the history and the geography classes. Is the more that I can learn, the more that I can demonstrate this, I want to take more academic risks, Now, there's another piece, to talk about in general about just like this connection between literacy and social studies. Why do you think that social studies maybe flies under the radar of the reading class when we're just talking about reading instruction?
Such a good question. I think, we tend to think in our silos. So it's like, oh, that is an ELA test or a literacy test. So that falls to the ELA literacy teacher. I think that is a silly answer, but it is often true, right? That we live in our little silos. But I know that another big issue, especially now in the younger grades, one of the bigger issues is time and the time pressure and the scheduling. And what's the first thing that always ends up getting cut out of the elementary teacher's schedule is their science and social studies time. And I think it comes back to like maybe looking at those ways of integrating it a bit more so it doesn't feel like a separate time. But also just thinking about how, you can make sure that you do get it in there and not just treat it like something that's optional, because that social studies content, science content is going to help just as much as another 10 minutes of phonics time.
So before I do completely let you go, I just want to think about a big wish. So just thinking about your big wish or just big idea in general that you want to leave us with as far as teaching reading and building knowledge, or maybe something that you just wish more elementary educators understood.
I think continuing to think through like, how do we continue to keep kids' natural curiosity going so that the texts are meaningful for them, right? That meaningful content in that text, they want to explore it. What's the thing that's going to get them to want to learn more about this topic to like fuel that curiosity? I know like I hear that so much about like we squash the curiosity in kids, and it's like, how can we keep that going? Because this is the place to do it, right? In this content, learning about your world, this is the place to get kids to keep wanting to learn more. And I think, I mean, equity is another big like conversation, and this is part of it, right? Like we all know that every student that walks in your classroom is going to come with different experiences into your classroom, and that's just the way it's going to be. But building these like that background for students, building this knowledge for all of your students is going to help level the playing field for sure, not just in reading, but like in life, right? Like in the world we live in today, knowing what's happening in the world is just huge. That is my biggest wish, is just like keep that curiosity going and like finding ways again to like integrate reading throughout your day, integrate the social studies topics and conversations throughout your day, and not just, making it one time of day where that happens, but like how do we bring it all together?
To learn more about Melissa's work, you can visit the Melissa and Lori Love Literacy podcast or check out her book, which are linked in our show notes.
This podcast is produced by Knowledge Matters. You can learn more about our work at www.knowledgematters.org. To catch all of the History Matters podcasts, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.